So, hi, Justin. I'm so glad to be able to announce that this will be our first podcast for APG. And I have some questions and stuff to run through and just get to know you a little bit more. And if you're ready, I am.
Awesome. I am so excited. So, first of all, we have to introduce Lindsey, the voice behind the mic. So, Lindsey Duvall is a dear friend and colleague who I've known for how many years now? I think 5? No, longer than 5.
7 or 8 at this point?
7 or 8.
Time flies when you're having fun, right?
Exactly. And we met, how did we meet?
So, I actually used to work for a financial company that Justin's team at the time had designed a program for. And we actually met at an event and had them at conference and stuff and was able to roll out this amazing product that changed that company's whole, the way they ran their business and stuff. So, I mean, it was huge. And
Yeah, it was.
I stepped out on my own, and funny enough, Justin and them were my first client.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
absolutely amazing to be able to continue to work with them.
And we have a lot more in common than just work, which I'm sure will surface in this recording and future recordings. So I just want to thank anyone who has clicked to listen to this podcast and give us a chance. But yeah, let's get into our first topic. So what is our first topic?
So the first topic for this episode is going to be the benefits of traveling and seeing other perspectives.
That is one of my favorite topics. That's something I'm really passionate about, which I know you can relate to as well, because we both come from smaller towns where a lot of our friends and a lot of our colleagues have not traveled extensively. And it's really, I honestly feel like it's a gift to be able to leave my daily bubble and go and see other towns and other perspectives. So I'm excited to talk about this one.
Perfect. Absolutely. So my first question for you would be, you've traveled extensively, as I well know. So what got you on the road in the first place, Justin?
It was work. So going back to that small town, right? I grew up in Columbus, Georgia, which is not the smallest town in Georgia, but it's pretty small. And the only way I was going to get out of town was any opportunities afforded by work. And so fortunately, the first company I worked for during college was a tech company.
Okay.
And I worked my way up through the ranks there into a role where, we'll talk about this in a later episode, I think. We were building a platform, and that platform had clients all over the country and around the world. So through that first company, I was able to go and gather requirements for this platform in California, New York, Colorado, England. And that was as a early 20-something-year-old with no money in his pocket. So that was really my first introduction into travel. And of course, what was not to love, right? The company was picking up the bill, which was great. And otherwise, I would have never gone to those places. So that's really what sparked the interest in going places and appreciating those different perspectives.
Yeah, and just what's out there outside of those small towns and stuff, and just being able to, have that Disney perspective of it's a whole new world out there. As I always joke when I traveled.
Exactly. It's funny you mentioned Disney, because the very first time I went to New York City and popped out of Penn Station, I go out on the street and I'm looking around, and it is the scale of it, the scale of the high rises and the traffic and the noise. It honestly felt like a theme park. It was too bizarre to be real. And I just appreciated that. I was in New York not long ago, maybe a few weeks ago, for a conference, and I still had that same initial reaction.
Really?
It's just that different than the bubble we're in day in and day out.
Yeah, and especially with the slower pace coming from a small town and stuff, and then being able to really get in a big city like that. I mean, it's insane.
It is.
Yeah. So, those are definitely some amazing cities. I mean, I heard England in there and stuff like that. So what were you doing in those locations for your company and stuff while you were out there?
It was a mix. Admittedly, it was a mix. The primary mission of going to those places was business. And we were meeting with clients who had purchased licenses to the software we had designed and built. And my role was to go and meet with them and understand their day in the life of their operations and elicit their requirements, things that we could configure in the software so that it would work well for them. And ultimately, that was the purpose of each one of those earliest trips anyway. Subsequent business trips haven't been that different because I'm still in technology, still doing configuration, still doing custom development, but that was the business purpose. But I appreciate that many of those trips were so long in duration that we would have the evenings and the weekends. So like when we went out to California, at the time, the client was Providian Financial, and they're not in business anymore. They became Washington Mutual and I think WAMU, and then eventually folded. Sorry about that, Providian friends. But while we were there, it was in the Bay Area of San Francisco. So we would take the BART train out from the suburbs where we were into the city, and we would go to the restaurants and see, the full house houses and
So fun.
Alcatraz Island out in the Bay. And we would see those things. And I just, honest to God, I read about them or saw them on TV to that point, but I never thought it was within my ability to actually go and see it in person. So for me, it was just, obviously for anyone, it's cool to see it, but to be snapped into a reality where you're actually there changes everything.
Absolutely. Everything. That's kind of how I felt when I went out to Arizona for the first time. I joked with people that we stayed at the Ritz there doing an event, and I was like, I grew up watching Westerns with my grandfather.
Right.
So being able to then actually be out west and seeing the cactus and stuff and just seeing how massive they were and just that beautiful landscape and stuff out there. I mean, it's just, yeah. And I can only imagine San Francisco area.
Well, exactly. And I think what's interesting too is even in the U.S., as you go from region to region, city to city, there are nuances in the way people go about their day. So when I'm designing software, as an example, for people who live in a San Francisco type environment, a more urban environment, I have to think about these things. Will they be using this software while they're taking an Uber from place to place? Or will they be on the train? Do I need to think about latency with a Wi-Fi signal, not Wi-Fi signal, but cellular signal while they're on a train, and store more data locally because they may go underground, right? So there's all these different things that you just don't think about until you're in that environment and people make you aware that, yeah, this is a thing. This is our normal life. You really have to account for that.
Yeah. And you really have to take into consideration your market of what you're working with and stuff.
Totally.
So that leads into, is there a specific moment or experience in each of those cities, or at least a couple of those cities, that had a profound impact on your perspective?
Oh, yeah. There's one that stands out as the prime example, and this is when I worked for Slalom Consulting a few years ago. We had a client. The client is called CHEP. They make pallets. So if you think about a warehouse like a Sam's Club or Costco or these giant Amazon warehouses along the interstate, all those goods are stored on wooden pallets. CHEP manufactures pallets, and you can tell theirs from others because theirs are blue. Little useless fact there, but if you see a blue pallet, that's a CHEP pallet.
Now I know.
And you can tell everyone over dinner, hey, did you know that blue pallets come from CHEP? So CHEP hired us at Slalom to think about ways we could help the plant operations where they bring used pallets back and either destroy them or refurbish them so they can go back out and carry goods on ships and trucks and whatnot. Well, travel was involved, and I love this. We were actually invited over to Manchester, England, way north of London, and the whole purpose was to go and see their biggest pallet refurbishment plant, and it was in England. So, which I love. England is just incredible. I'm a big old nerd when it comes to the royal family and watching all that stuff. Downton Abbey, I'm there. I need a week in it now. But so we went to Manchester, and we put on our hard hats and our steel-toed boots, and we went into the refurbishment plant for pallets. And what we learned is out there, the pallets are coming in, and it's open to the elements. So they had rain, cold, wind, all that weather you would expect to see in northern England. They were experiencing it. So here we were to design a mobile application that would work on an Android tablet, and it had to be able to function out in those elements attached to a forklift that's picking up pallets off the back of a truck. So talk about user empathy, right?
Absolutely.
We are out there with our hard hats and safety glasses and boots on in the rain, shivering, and these guys are out there doing that every day and not complaining. So we had to figure out, how do we mount an Android tablet to a forklift? How do we design it so that while they're wearing big work gloves in the cold, they can use touch targets because they can't use their actual fingers because they're protected and they're cold, to be able to direct their work and make operations more efficient at this plant. So that's my favorite example. That's the one where travel was involved. We had a bucket load of empathy gained from seeing those men operate, men and women, let me take that back, out in those elements, and to come up with an example of or a platform that they could use really meant a lot. That actually felt pretty good.
I love that. I mean, just knowing that you really put yourself literally in those people's shoes while you were there. But it was also the challenges that y'all may not have even anticipated when y'all first went out there of like, oh, these are some extra challenges that we have to think about. But that's great that the company put y'all out there. So then you really could see for yourself of exactly what these people are up against and how your company at that time could help them in that sense.
Well, and I think something that plays into that right now, we see it a lot, certainly as we're hiring and recruiting people, there's a huge desire for remote work. And I'm a big fan of it. Everyone on our team works from home, except when we need to go to our clients' offices for strategic meetings, kickoffs, reviews, things like that. And that's not culturally, that's not intended to change. That said, I would almost advise anyone who's thinking about a 100% remote position to still look for those opportunities to go visit their client every once in a while or go visit their team wherever they're based, because getting out of your house means getting out of your head. And it also, I just think, leads to better creative process to come up with a solution to whatever they're working on.
Mm-hmm. And just keeping those relationships. Because, I mean, it is one thing. It's almost similar to keeping cameras off when you're virtual all the time versus actually being able to see people. Because that's a challenge that I think everybody's experienced, is just being able to make sure that you can read people's body language.
Yes.
And being able to see facial expressions or if somebody's confused on something. So it's another layer still of putting that in-person meetings and stuff that are huge.
I agree completely.
Yeah. So with that, how about any cultural differences? You grew up in Georgia, so in your earliest travels, how did you adapt?
That was interesting. I would say my first trip to England, we were going over to London back in the early 2000s and acclimating to, one, the dialect, because, from the South, I'm used to accents like ours that I know are coming through on this podcast really clearly. I was used to that. Over there, sure, you hear the Queen of England speak on TV, or you hear Downton Abbey, and it's crystal clear. They just sound elegant and, like very well educated. But when you meet just the guy who's driving a taxi, he's speaking slang, and he sounds their equivalent of Southern, like we do if we've been out having a beer or something, right? So you just getting acclimated to the local jargon and getting acclimated to the local food. When you go to a Subway to get a sandwich in England, they don't have the same toppings we have at Subway here in the U.S. They have like corn niblets and prawn, like, shrimp that put on a sub there. Here we have ham and cheese and some peppers, maybe. So just getting acclimated to those sorts of nuances, I will say, as a young guy from Georgia, not even acclimated to going to a big city like Atlanta or DC or New York before going overseas, I didn't have a huge appreciation for it until I got there. And once I got there, I don't know, I guess it's just how I'm wired. I got into it. I was like, I want to try everything. I want to live like the locals live. And, I think just having an open mind is really important.
I love that. And it's just one of those things where when you get over, you watch shows and you do movies and you do all of these things. But again, until you get there, it's a whole different ball game, and just learning, I kind of know where I'm going, but then you're trusting these people when you're getting in the taxis with them.
Oh, totally.
It's okay. How do I eat like the locals? Because of course I want to go try all the ones that's out there, but you want to eat like the locals, and you really want to immerse yourself in that experience while you're over there. Yes. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did, which is amazing.
Well, and I wonder if maybe like you and I growing up in smaller towns, I wonder if we have more appreciation for that than potentially people who grew up in a New York City or Los Angeles type place. I would be curious of that. Honestly, if anyone's listening to this and wants to email us or comment wherever there are comments,
yes,
I'm curious of that because it's an experience we'll never have. So I would like to know.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So what's the value of travel from a business perspective?
I guess really for me, especially now as a small business owner, right? Our team is, as of this recording, 9 strong. So we really have to go where the work is. We don't yet have that luxury of having an office in every major city and a worldwide headquarters and all of that. So I think from a business perspective, it's important to not say no, to be willing to get in the car or get on a plane and go meet people, because those relationships matter. Your likelihood of landing work as well as continuing work go up once you're in front of people and you just hit it off, and just, people like to put a face to a name beyond just Zoom, right? I think it's still important. There's still a place for it.
Yeah, like we talked about earlier. I mean, it's just that human interaction and just having those relationships,
Yes.
and being able to be in a room with people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how did it change your approach to problem solving or decision making, both at work and in your personal life?
I think, our core values as a company are empathy and stewardship. The empathy piece is rooted in all of this. I feel like we design better solutions, and that solution can be software or it can be something else, once we walked a mile in someone else's shoes, whoever we're serving. So if we were building software for a call center, you better believe I want me and my teammates sitting in that call center, listening to calls and hearing what those people are going through day in and day out. And to the extent they're willing to open up about it, tell me about your day before you get to work and your day after you leave work, because I want the piece we can control to be as good as possible and as supportive as possible. So the travel, this whole experience of meeting other cultures, meeting other people, seeing how they live, fully informs that core value of empathy that we try and infuse in literally everything that we do as a business.
Yeah. It sounds like, to me, it's kind of like zooming in and out with a lens.
Yes.
Is that also it's seeing the beginning and the end and the middle, not always in that order sometimes, of really being able to add in that empathy because you understand top to bottom exactly what you're going into.
That's right.
That all plays a part into it.
That's right. And that's why you'll see us often create what we call a persona of who we're serving. So a persona is this, sheet of paper that attempts to synthesize how a person feels about a task, what motivates them, what they consider successful, their likes and dislikes, all of that. That's all about trying to get in the heads of who we're serving and do a better job. And often we'll pin those personas to our wall so that when we're working, we can constantly be reminded that's the person we're serving. Is the thing I just designed really doing right by this person? So we always try and tie it back to that.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a roadmap. And then it's just that you have those milestones that you're wanting to hit, but it's also remembering that there's signs that you've already put in place along the way to keep everybody on track.
That's right. It's humanizing it.
Right?
So.
Yeah. So with you saying that our company's core values are empathy and stewardship, did any of these travel experiences influence the decision to make those two values our core values for APG?
I guess we kind of touched on that. It did, because I don't know another way of operating. I have a lot of empathy for meeting people where they are and not just catering to one segment of any given population. If we're building a solution like I did for your company years ago, right? What me and my team designed was not meant to just serve your highest performing salespeople, but really to help those lowest performing salespeople do even better and have even more support than they already had. If we had just stayed in meetings with the people who represented the top 1% of your sales team, it would have been a terrible solution. Luckily, we socialized it with lots of people across the spectrum, and they all weighed in and chimed in. And ultimately, what we created was pretty darn good. It met a lot of the requirements, and people really liked it. So I feel like stewardship comes in with that. I am always mindful of every dollar that gets spent, both as a business owner and that my clients are spending on the work that we do. I want them to get an excellent value for every penny they spend with us. And I'm going to look for ways, consciously look for ways to save them money to the extent they need to or want to or otherwise should. It's just, I can't imagine operating any other way. I know there are companies out there, because I've worked for them and with them, that look to sell you a Rolls Royce when you're there for a Toyota Camry. Mm-hmm. That's fine. They obviously are doing something right because those companies are still in business. Ethically, I'm not there.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you have to follow those footprints.
Correct.
That's what makes you unique. That's what makes APG unique.
That's right.
That's why we continue to obtain, what we have.
Yes.
And being able to retain all of those clients' relationships and stuff. And you just never know where that leads from, because you're leading from your heart and you're leading from your experiences and making sure that you leave everybody feeling the way that you would want to be treated.
I'm glad we're talking about this in episode 1 of this podcast series, because I think that helps explain why we're doing this in the first place. There's a lot of why behind what we do and what makes us different. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't work with another vendor. This is not a sales pitch. It's just kind of giving an explanation of why we do what we do and how we do.
Yeah, because you have to start out with a why
Yes,
when you're in business and stuff.